I'm Carolyn Priester Jones. Welcome back to the Garden of Eden. Where we last left off, God had just delivered the news to Adam and Eve that they were all soon leaving the garden. Now this was big news to Adam and Eve because they had only known the Garden of Eden. That's the only life they had ever known. Now granted, they had made some huge mistakes there, but God had forgiven them, God had redeemed them, and God had even made them junior partners in creation. So Adam and Eve had been learning lots of things, and truth be known, maybe they were getting a little bit too comfortable. You know, sometimes when we kind of get comfortable in life and then we just kind of sit back and coast, God does tend to shake things up a little bit. He does do something that prompts us to go on to the next level and grow. You know, that baby in the womb gets unceremoniously pushed out of that comfortable womb into a larger world where that baby becomes a child and learns all kinds of new things, and that child continues to grow. So for Adam and Eve, it was time for the next chapter. It was time for them to grow. Now, Adam and Eve may have thought that they were ready to go. I mean, they really didn't have very much to pack. But I can imagine God taking a look at them and saying, "You can't go out dressed like that." Now, remember that Adam and Eve, in their efforts to hide themselves from God, had covered themselves with fig leaves. Genesis 3:7 tells us that after eating from that fruit of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, it says the eyes of both of them were opened, and they realized they were naked, and they were ashamed. And so they sewed fig leaves together and made coverings for themselves. Now that was the first problem. Anytime that you try to come up with something on your own to cover something God has created, well, you're in trouble. Now, before we lay too much blame and too much judgment on Adam and Eve, let's make it personal for us. Is there any area of your life that you would like to keep hidden? Would you be ashamed if everyone could see that part of your life? You know, we may not use fig leaves. We're a little more sophisticated than that. But most of us do have something that we would like to hide from everybody. And it really comes down not to how the world sees us, but how we see ourselves. And if we take that to another level, it really comes down to how we see the one who made us, how we see God, our Creator. Now, God wasn't going to let Adam and Eve go zipping out into this big, wide, challenging world dressed in the wrong way with just rapidly decaying fig leaves. He was about to give them, first of all, a final exam before leaving the garden. If they passed that exam, he was going to give them new clothes. Now, the same questions that I'm imagining he asked Adam and Eve, he very easily could ask us. So let's take that test along with Adam and Eve. The first question is a big one. God would be saying to us, "Do you trust me? Will you give up all of your coverings and stand before me completely uncovered and let me look at you as I created you to be?" Now that's a big step right there. We like to think that God doesn't know how we look, that we could actually hide from God. And of course, that's crazy. We can't do that. So really what he's asking is, will you look at yourself and not feel shame? Will you see that you are made in my image and no one else's? Will you let me dress you? Will you willingly go where I lead you without wanting to know every detail about where we're going? Again, will you trust me? Do you know my voice in a way that you can tell it from anyone else? Can you hear my voice and know that it's my voice? Can you hear another voice and say, that's not God? Will you do everything I tell you to do and not do anything that I say stay away from? Now take a moment to absorb your answers. That really can be kind of a tough test. So think about it and think about how God sees you and how you see you. You know, David the psalmist, who really had kind of a speckled life. I mean, David had various problems. He could be said he was a flawed man. But it was also said that David was a man after God's own heart. And in one of the times that David considered himself in the light of God's love, he was absolutely awed. And so he wrote about it. He realized that he was himself a living, breathing piece of art, God's masterpiece. David said, "For you created my inmost being. You knit me together in my mother's womb. I praise you because I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Your works are wonderful." I know that full well. To know that was an amazing thing to David, and could be an amazing thing to you. When you can stand before God, willing to remove any covering you've got and give it to Him, then He will show you who you really are. Well, Adam and Eve passed that first test. They stood in the presence of their Creator. They willingly gave up their fig leaves, the things that they had used to try to hide from God. And they were ready for their new clothes. Now, what would God-designed clothes even look like? Well, you're going to have to join me next time to find out. Now, I'll give you a hint. God gave Adam and Eve the same clothing that He gave you. Genesis 3:21 says, "The Lord God made garments of skin for Adam and his wife and clothed them." But what was that skin made of? Well, we're going to find out next time. I'm Carolyn Priester-Jones. If you would like more information about my books, my blogs, my tweets, and this video series, then I invite you to check out my website at www.christianreading.com/cjones. I'll be looking forward to seeing you next time.